Hi, Santeri.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Yeah, thanks for joining. I see you guys right over here on this this handy dandy little map. I see.
Yeah, Helsinki is marked on like all of the maps in the report.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think your center's efforts have gone a long way towards contributing to that fact.
Yeah, and the last report, so we complained that they hadn't taken the Nordics into account enough. So this time they made sure to contact us a couple of times. So we were part of a lot of the workshops for this one.
That's good. I'd like to learn more about, practically how they go about representing different regions. I'm a little surprised. I mean, not super surprised, but it's Eastern Europe is almost exclusive or excluded from it completely. I mean, again, it's not a huge surprise, but it stands out when it's highlighted like this. Poland, particularly, yeah. I would have expected a big enough market to be on there.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but most likely they just don't have enough sources for data in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Romania's got, a healthy little, market. I mean, I guess it always comes down to when they're talking about the eco and coming up with strategies. It's whether it's holistic or whether it's just practically, the easiest people perhaps to help or the people who can most dramatically or most visibly benefit from any particular action, which would obviously be French and German, maybe some of the other Western countries, the Netherlands countries. So we'll get started in a little bit, but I mean, we can still be chatting. Did anything really kind of catch your eye? I mean, here I've split it up by industry actions, and over there are the policy, which are much longer. There's a couple that are joint policy and industry actions. I mean, it's curious to me, this quality label. I like the idea. I think it's pretty simple, but I think in practice, I don't know how
exactly
how someone
based
might go
what?
about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be fun. You get like a badge of quality on Steam or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think. I mean, I think for something like sustainability, okay, or something that has a reporting element to it that would be a regulatory decision already. But that's not, quality is so subjective. I think when they were they're talking about the cultural sector as well. I mean, and that's just a big can of worms to start getting into the quality of cultural investments and such.
Yeah.
Yeah, although you could say that policy is about open standards, and they formulated other things that they consider important for a European perspective, and so then the quality label could sort of say it is up to the standards or of like open standards or certain ethical values or whatever. That I can imagine would be, especially from like an open standards, open source point of view, would be interesting.
Well, and what is quality? It can't just be quality. It has to be framed, and I think
what quality
anything
means,
that has to do with reporting.
Yeah,
I mean, even for things like, this is a very much what do they call it? I can't remember now. The sustainability, governance, and is it ESG, ethics, sustainability, and governance? It's such a moving target, so subjective. But at least in that case, in theory, each of those would have some type of reporting basis for receiving an ESG label. So if we take out the high quality, just broadly speaking, but we take an ethics, is that representation in terms of maybe not the product, obviously, because not all of it's like has representation as a product, but in terms of the team. I mean, I would love to see some breakdowns into to the startup teams and giving some type of, like they do for companies and their boards. I'd like to see startups kind of measured on a certain degree of representation, but that's also really hard because startups are so geographically defined often. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just think that the quality label, it's just bad worded here. They did discuss it somewhere else, that it's like taking into account the European way of thinking and democracy and ethics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's just like their way of like shortening it somehow, but then it doesn't sound as good anymore.
Yeah. I think there was another place, and it's not the first time I've kind of heard it. I think I heard it at Stereotia a lot previously, because I think there was a keynote event, a keynote like panel discussion about European XR and what made it European or not. And I think that quality is very hard to define. It seems obvious to certain people, and then it's lacking in the discussion when it's put on the.
No, but I think one of in the Planet also mentioned, and this is what I think it was not really, or was it in policy? I don't remember. But they mentioned the European standards on openness and interoperability.
I think, maybe down. I think I saw that towards the bottom. Yeah, the last one. Yeah.
Well, promote the development of interoperable solutions. I would rather say really regulate it. So that's where I found where European could really make a stand and make a point. Also within the Digital Rights Act, we demand interoperability. Like with social media platforms, we're going to be even more strong on that when it comes to the metaverse or, whatever kind of platforms or infrastructure. And then a quality label would make sense if it says, it applies to certain standards of interoperability and openness. Then I understand what a quality label could do.
Yeah. I think promote is a little bit problematic because it just isn't it's not very committed,
No, it's just like we really want it to happen, but we're not going to do anything necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, because you could regulate that.
Yeah, I think part of that is about who's actually writing the report, that they don't actually have the possibility to regulate something. So they are just saying promote because that's all they can do. And then it's up to some... Yeah.
But still, this is still they can suggest, right? Sorry. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Louise. Hey.
I would say, I'd say that they can suggest because, as you said, just saying promoting, it's like the same as saying, well, we want you to be good. We want you to be the nicest way and to do things the nicest way possible. And that's actually not going to work. Same thing with, I think, labels. I've seen a lot of quality labels, and when things like ethics come down to a label, usually it's all just around that, all good intentions, not actual, actual consequences if you don't comply with that. So I also do believe that it would be interesting to have a more solid concept of what that label could be or that seal could be, and if we can surround ourselves or surround around that label several NGOs and several associations and organizations that can add value and that can more than add value, let's say conceptually, but also to participate in creating something that could be something that you could belong to, but if you wouldn't belong to, something like the Better Business Bureau, something like that. So it could, that those guys at a given point in time, not right now, but that would actually abide to those rules. So, and if you didn't, then you would be out. So, I would say that having a more solid concept of what these labels could be and then having an enforcing of those, rules would also be really interesting to think about.
Yeah, because what I liked is that there was, I think it was a good overview over the concerns that people have in both in industry and culture and and education and science, and everybody was agreeing on the fact we don't want to be dominated by American commercial platforms, right? So I was really hoping that they would take that and transfer that into more profound policies, saying, if an American platform wants to, somehow enter the European market, providing services, whatever, there's going to be certain standards like they now did with social media. But then when you read this, you're like, yeah, you sort of saying the right things, but there's nothing connected to it that feels in any way firm or really making a difference, So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the label. I think for me, the practical value for obtaining the label, committing yourself to the costs of obtaining it, of reporting and documenting as well in order to get it, is that it should open up something. It should open up different tax tiers, or it should open up different sizes or different scales, or just different types of funding sources that are connected to the labels. And maybe having a tiered structure of labels, you can go up, you can go down, you can lose it, but if people are going to, particularly startups that maybe are struggling to be profitable or to sustain themselves at this point, it's real cost for them to report and to do so honestly. So they should be compensated for that in not just a cost covering way, but like really in a profitable way. They should be rewarded. And I would have loved to have seen that label recommendation really be connected to the financing more concretely. There's another thing where they're talking about just the lack of private investment in Europe, and that's something I know has been talked about a lot. Like then it needs to be much more public investment. And they did talk about something that I think is important, is a wider variety of smaller grants, just more funding opportunities at smaller scales. But I don't know if they kind of referenced it another place, just the lack of maybe capacity to assess all those applications. I really heard someone from the UK who was pretty knowledgeable about it say that for the Dream project, that Midsummer Nights thing that the Royal Shakespeare Company did, that kind of the story behind the scenes was they had this big amount of money, but no capacity to really assess or follow a lot of different projects. So they really preferred to just give all of it to one big recipient rather than break it into 1 million pound, projects. And it's just a matter of bureaucratic capacity to execute that. And I felt like probably that's not uncommon. It probably goes into a lot of grant awarding, and why there's not more, right? It's small.
Oh yeah, I mean in the Netherlands, especially the cultural funding is still siloed in traditional arts. So there's a film fund, there's a theater fund, so that in itself is already problematic. And then you notice that many of the funding is then for production. So to make a small knowledge is transferred, and there's not really an ecology built, like the report was also saying. It's this fragmented ecology, both in a business sense, but also in a funding scheme sense. So, I think especially something like the European Union should probably not fund too much projects, but rather invest in infrastructure, right? Like an ecology, like creating hubs or means to sort of connect together. I think in Europe, if all parties are now dealing with this industry would somehow have a way to work together, I wonder how much more is needed, honestly. Yeah. Other than maybe the funding from private investors or an ecology where you can do some experimental work to begin with, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's really about, I mean, Silicon Valley is an ecology in a way. It's not strange that a lot of startups emerge out of that environment, right? And in Europe, it's so scattered. It's so fragmented.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue, that every country is different. And even when the Commission is trying to utilize these hubs and whatever, like, the European Digital Innovation Hub program that just started. we got the status for our consortium in Helsinki, and part of that funding is that 50%. I think it's 50% comes from the national funding organization, and half of it comes from EU. And it has now been like almost a year, and the Finnish national funding instruments and the organizations, they still haven't managed to figure out how they can actually fund us, since they don't have any existing instruments that actually fit the funding purpose and the way it works in the commission level. So even though we got the green light for several consortiums in Finland to get the status and get the funding from EU, the national instruments just can't work around that, and there's been a lot of issues with that. So everything is kind of behind schedule.
Yeah.
So that's also a problem. If you try to fund something on European level, then all of the national things come in the way.
What is your consortium, by the way? Because I don't know yet.
I'm from Helsinki XR Center.
Okay.
Yeah, they're one of the big blue dots on the map over there.
They are the dots.
Yes. You can tell. It's funny, like when you look at the map and you're like, I know that. I know who that is. So, yeah. I mean, I think absolutely we were talking about just the fragmentation and it came up a lot, and it, no surprise it came up. Like what would help to reduce fragmentation? What is it like that that would maybe make it easier? I'm again coming from my perspective from East and Southeast Europe. What would make that easier for those markets to be opened up, perhaps to Western XR companies, and vice versa? What would help those local ones find support to then grow into the West? I don't really know what the barriers are, other than just language. I don't know to what extent it's where it falls down otherwise.
I would say one good idea would be to have like what we're doing right now, but at a much larger scale. For instance, one of the things that I don't understand is why there's like this. There was this news of this VR Fest or this metaverse platform of sorts that was hired by the EU, and there was like a big investment, and no one actually showed up. It was supposed to be a party or something like that.
This is really sad.
but again, exactly, it was a bit sad. But then when we think about, okay, so how many projects did similar projects like enabling VR venues for universities to do their stuff. It's not that hard, I think, to like create infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I'm saying about software. I'm talking about these kind of venues. Like, for instance, Engage already has like a bit of that infrastructure already available. So why not like create some of it available and make it available for universities, for governments? For instance, one of the main things that I feel right now at this time is that although we are not featured that much in there here in Portugal, although we do have like the biggest VR AR R&D lab in the Iberian Peninsula, and we do have more than 130 companies working in VR and AR. But I didn't find actually in the report any reference to Portugal itself. Actually, I think there was one. But still, this to say that one of the main things that we feel is that the central government and the public institutions officers are really, really, really off. They do not have. They're talking about electronic justice and e-commerce and discussing stuff that we were discussing 20 years ago. Still. So I do, although there are people informed in it, decision makers are not in touch with reality. Sometimes they think that augmented reality solutions that we are right now pushing to the market are stuff of dreams and things that are lined up for to happen in like 5 years. That the oddest thing happened, like for instance, I was talking to a Secretary of State, and that Secretary of State was not aware that in Portugal we were already having or setting up like a drone factory for flying cars to be piloted in 2024, and this was the Secretary of State of a government that actually funded incentives towards that happening. So that's actually another thing that I also think that, for instance, Korea, that for instance Dubai is trying to sort out in their own way, which is create venues also for public services to be available in these platforms. And by doing that, also enabling a more seamless way for people to interact with these platforms and to have yet another kind of experience with public service. So I think that would be like a way to approach people inside the European space, to create more ways for people to talk and to share concerns and to, well, maybe even start working together.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But that's also part of the issue. Like it mentioned somewhere in the report, like the lack of information. Like if I think about Finland and the public sector, the people there, they don't know what VR or AR is. They think it's for gaming and they have no need for that. If their services would be transferred to virtual reality, they wouldn't use it since it's not useful for them. Yeah. And I think that's a common view at the moment. So educating those people first would need to be done before we can actually move any kind of services anywhere.
And I think talking about the lack of maybe expertise in perhaps some of the report writing or in these institutions, it brings to me the question of should there be expansion or recruiting from industry for those who would be open to the idea of serving in some type of advisory council position? I mean, it seems logical, and I'm sure that they have, but are those people enough? Are they empowered? I mean, because if there's information, I mean, obviously, like not everybody knows every market, but if you know the industry fairly well because you're coming from it, you can go find that without it taking months and a lot of resources, because you kind of know what you're looking for, and you know how to tap the communities and networks within the industry. So I think, I mean, reading it, there were a couple things, and it's not a bad report. I've certainly read much worse. But definitely the whole meat of the middle is a lot of very high level stuff that could have been written 5 years ago, and it wouldn't have materially changed very much. And I think there were a couple things earlier where I think specifically, maybe Santeri, I don't know if this is how you guys look at it. There was a Finnish rock band, and they were talking about their VR concert, which, as far as I could tell, was in no way a VR concert, but just called immediately. It was very early on. It's like when I saw that, it's all right. It kind of questions a little bit the credibility of the authors and how much they can discern marketing and very superficial types of reporting from something more substantial. And I think, do they have the right people? Are they recruiting from industry to join these types of initiatives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's part of what we were criticizing from the beginning, that they're actually hiring someone to do the report that has no knowledge of the actual industry. So they are kind of learning themselves while they are doing the writing.
I think that the report was done also based on those meetings, right? Those sessions that happened with, several experts. I participated in one of them, and it was, again, it was interesting to hear the thoughts of people, but at the end of the day, taking like the pulse of what the market is aching about is not actually the same as doing policy, and is definitely not the same as having a strategy. And one thing, for instance, that right now I'm lacking here is exactly that. So regarding, for instance, ethics, regarding, for instance, privacy, one of the things that actually which is a pain for me, is that I do see, and I'm not really. I would definitely love to hear a bit more about this from you. I'm seeing privacy and ethics and safety like as a really big private market in during this decade. So I'm seeing like integration. I'm seeing like people that want to remain or have a specific level of privacy, a specific level of safety to be able to or to be wanting to pay for that. And if I have like something from that coming from, I don't know, China or the US or coming from Europe, maybe I'll choose the European one, even if I'm in Korea, even if I'm in Dubai, because I'm pretty, well, I acknowledge the notion that these guys that come from that continent have and how they prize trust. So I would say that like turning trust into and like leveraging trust building as a market in its own could be like a really nice strategy to move forward. I don't know would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that they don't know enough how the privacy or the security in this area works, and that's also why they now concentrated on funding a couple applications which are researching the subjects of ethics and privacy in VR and AR and related technologies. So yeah, you're right. I would hope that in a couple of years when we get results from those projects, then they would be prepared to actually make a grand strategy around those issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and because I mostly work in culture and education, I find it problematic that the people who design the platforms decide the levels of privacy settings or whatever, or controls. So I think when we come back to standards again, I think it would be for a European Union very beneficial to say each system needs to have, in terms of privacy, have the following controls that everybody for themselves within their own practice and use can configure, up to their own standards. Because, of course, it's with each use case also different how you deal with privacy and how you deal with all sorts of other ethical issues. What I find mostly problematic is that now so much of the controls are actually either held by the company and or moderated by the company. And I think it would be very European thinking ideas that you say, no, the technology should be in there and it should follow certain standards and we'll update it every year when we have more research on it. But in the end, the user in a certain, user group is in control of that type of privacy settings or whatever. And then again, I mean, I find it very non-specifically mentioned in the report. When you talk about policies, I think you should be much more strict about it.
Yeah. We had this this lunch, this Meta sponsored lunch, talking about broadly speaking the ethical concerns and other things. The European metaverse at VR Days. And it was a lot of these same, a little bit abstracted things. There were some real high level people seemingly working for the EC in different capacities. And they seem to think that it was enough that we pass these regulations and then to have access to the market, these companies follow them here, follow them here. But I think what they're not really always recognizing is that there's just so much about a platform service that is not localized within the jurisdiction of Europe, and it's still very much an essential part of that experience. Other people have this, and I don't know the right way around it, but coming from my perspective, my focus being on social, I floated the idea that there's no governments in metaverse platforms. There are only platforms, and to the extent that their servers are located, they'll follow certain things. But if something happens to me, or someone does something, there's just no recourse to anyone but the platform. There are no jurisdictions represented there, and I think that's something that should be considered more. What digital citizenship is, And I'm not someone who's like a big fan of boundaries, but I do think that there are, in the absence of boundaries, the only thing that kind of protects the culture of a community inside of a platform is just language barriers. And that's, that's something that's very much under threat from translation services or just broader assimilation. And I think there could be some radical proposals around how to ring fence a European cultureverse, and if you want to join in, then these are the regulations for participation, either as a platform or as a participant. I don't know. I don't think the server locating, I don't think that's doing the trick. I don't think it's enough in its current form. And not that I'm an expert on what applies to servers and the data management on servers within the jurisdiction, but I think it needs to go beyond that. Joris, what did you think specifically about the culture section as it's described and depicted? And I don't know Creative Europe so much. I actually didn't realize that Creative Europe was supporting Venice. I actually always thought the Venice College was purely a biennale and a public funded thing.
No. And many other festivals also partly supported through it, which I think is good. I think for people who are not necessarily into culture, the report works because it's just the diversity of cultural, like disciplines and how they also approach the whole XR experience in a different way and what the potential is. What I sort of thought was missing is more a discussion on a difference between types of users and types of applications. So I think if you talk about business models within creative industry, you could still talk about design applications. When it comes to cultural events or cultural forms of expression, not all of it can be translated into a business case. This is why we need cultural funding. Eh? So it's part of society. You value culture, and it cannot always, in a way, earn enough money to sort of, sustain itself. And this is what I felt was a bit lacking. So they immediately fed it back into entertainment, or they fed it back into more like industry-driven, which I understand. I mean, it's an investment, like commercial, report. But then I start to think like, so what about public space, right? And it's not only because of culture, but also healthcare and other things. And we tend to forget in these discussions to talk about public space. And if the metaverse becomes sort of somehow mixed or part of public spaces, how is that then funded, right? And that's a different way of thinking about value and where to put your money. And I think in that sense, I was also missing the role of universities, of institutes, of knowledge institutes, producing all sorts of innovations and new knowledge. And I think when they talk about these ecologies, I think it's not just about bringing investors together for startups to make applications. I think it's really about creating a space where public and private can sort of have their conversations and collaborations, where government, universities, and also companies can come together and say, so what is it for the long term that we want to develop? What is that what are the things we need in terms of infrastructure? Sort of build a shared vision there, because I think it's like with the transition in terms of our current energy needs, you cannot just leave it all up to the companies. You have to also, in a way, think long term, and companies are known for not doing that, obviously, for obvious reasons. So then I'm like, I was hoping that report would hint towards that a bit more, because if the European Union would have a role, it would be the long-term vision here. And so these ecologies to me are not just bring people with money together with companies who can make cool stuff. And also in a cultural sense, it's not just about making new types of theater. It's not only that. It's really about creating this public-private spaces and infrastructure for people to figure this out themselves for the longer term, and not just, short-term profits or whatever. And then, of course, the investments will get more and more. Yeah, fine. But, sure. but culture is not the same as industry or entertainment or whatever. So, yeah, these are thoughts that come to my mind. But I guess I understand the report is necessarily not written for for these kind of discussions. But
well, I actually thought I thought it was maybe that was part of the intent. I mean, I thought on the surface level, they were hoping to capture that, and I guess maybe they, not to a very great depth did they do so.
Well, but then they should have also put it in the policy things.
Yeah, that's true.
That these ecologies should not only exist of private parties, but also have public institutes and knowledge institutes part of those ecologies, because we're all inventing this space still together. So
Thank you.
I wonder what type of infrastructure stands out for you in the cultural space. I'm thinking, for example, let's say we wanted to have, let's just use theater. Let's say we wanted to have a really robust immersive theater economy. An economy, maybe not the right word, but it was an option that everyone in Europe should have the opportunity to, if they want to partake in immersive theater. What would be necessary for that infrastructurally? Is it headsets? Is it a platform?
Yeah, it's interesting that you ask it in this way, because that would already define an art silo again, which I think is maybe not the best way to approach it. But so it's more about accessibility to these different kind of experimental experiences that are partly co-located. So it asks, again, it's an infrastructural point. I mean, all the big theaters that I talk to, they say we don't have the infrastructure to facilitate this. And it's not just about headsets, but it's also how to make connections with different locations, how to educate people to get in, how to, involve all sorts of different disciplines. I was actually quite happy that they mentioned that this is really an interdisciplinary challenge. Yeah. Meaning, when it comes to knowledge development, you need to somehow also have everybody involved. So immersive theater should not become a specialism. It's rather that people from theater and people from games and people from computer science and people from ICT infrastructure and people, storytellers, whatever, should come together to make these kind of experiences. And this is often not, everything is organized in a way that everybody will stay in their own, disciplinary bubble or environment. So I think it is, again, this ecology should also provide maybe cultural centers that are not only a theater or a cinema or a library, but there should be this more like open knowledge spaces where people can develop new experiences, learn about them, have children being taught programming. It's to sort of rethink a bit what we mean when it comes to these kind of experiences and the skill sets that you need for them.
It's interesting. They have this over here. I think they're talking about how confident are you that your sector has the right skill set? Which one was that? I think this top one here. It's interesting that you mentioned having centers, because what is a science center? The purpose of a science center, right? It's supposed to make science accessible to those who will then go on, right? It's not meant to teach, though teaching is part of it. Would it make sense? I mean, in libraries too, right? It's meant to make reading accessible and culture and history and stuff. Would it make sense infrastructurally, rather than trying to give headsets or have a task force whose job was to go around, but to fund the construction, the establishment of public XR centers?
I'm a great believer of universities having also these campuses that also have businesses and startups involved, and sort of have these hybrid environments where people can exchange knowledge and then put them into practice, but also remain the fundamental research next to applications. And on top of that, when you talk about culture, I think actually the libraries in the Netherlands had to reinvent themselves completely. I mean, nobody is reading a physical book anymore, so to speak, but they became also hubs for elderly people to understand how the internet works. And so I think it's very worthwhile having universities with XR laboratories like we do connect to these cultural spaces that help also children to be educated and retrain professionals, but also connect to indeed like industry and cultural parties to sort of explore new ways of experiencing things. But then, of course, the question is who's in charge of that?
Exactly. I mean, it shouldn't be researchers, and they need more budgets. The facilities would have to be redesigned and reconsidered to serve public-facing purpose and as well. I mean, so definitely there should be connections to the universities where the people who know, the people who are creating, right, are there. But it can't be the same ones, right? It has to be, I think, purpose built. Yeah,
there are different agendas, but this is again where like policy could help. Where you say, every government invest a amount of money into these cultural hubs, and then on top of that, it would be great if those hubs are then within Europe connected. So I don't need a headset at home. I can go to the local XR cultural place and talk to everybody else in Europe and say hi to Nabil and stuff like that.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I think that's a good idea, but there's some issues, especially on from my experience on the national level. We've had some ideas like that, building that kind of centers in Finland, but the problem is with the funding that they always support building new things. But once those things are built and the activities have started, they don't have any kind of funding for actually maintaining the activities.
To sustain it, yes.
So that's even a problem for us, that we have to kind of scale down our activities with startup companies because we don't have the resources to actually help them. So they have to just work independently. So I think that's a big issue.
That's a very good point, and which would be another argument that something like the European Union, who can actually have a long-term vision and a cross-nation vision, should be the ones providing mostly, I would say, funding schemes, I guess, and infrastructure to do so.
Yeah, maybe I'll just like to share some two examples that we have. So up north in Portugal, there's this digital citizenship center that has kind of started doing some VR and AR onboarding training for elderly people and working inside inclusion programs. In that sense, they started creating a demand that then allowed them to then afterwards come forth and justify. This to say that one of the first things that I would say would be to have to prove the demand, because one of the big things that we have here in Portugal, and I'm guessing, in other places too, is this need to prove that the value is there and that we can actually bring in more stuff. So another thing that also happened was this bigger company called Teleperformance. They they did start like a VR and AR lab that is open to the community. And they are starting by themselves to, of course, doing their own research and development, but at the same time also try and leverage the community and try and create not only education and training opportunities, but also which are open. So in that sense, they're doing also their social responsibility through that, but also they're trying to leverage, of course, contact with potential talent that can afterwards work with them. So it's also a way for private companies to identify talent with which they can explore new ways of doing stuff. Now, following up on what you just said, Joris, it really is a huge, there really is a huge amount of possibilities, and we shouldn't pack them up into one or two boxes. So much that I do believe that this kind of art, digital art, can have at a given point in time also some big impact for tourism purposes. For instance, one of the things that we started to explore in the last actually in 3 months ago. So 3 months ago, we had Immerse Global Summit, which is, an immersive tech event happening in Madeira. And that was in September, yes. And Afterwards, we had Augmented World Expo. It also happened in Lisbon. And in both events, there were several immersive experiences, augmented reality experiences available for people that were visiting to explore. Now, add to that the fact that, for instance, right now there are, to my knowledge, 12 cities in Portugal, and not just in Portugal, 12 just in Portugal. You have several others in Spain, for instance, probably more, that already have augmented reality tours. Then suddenly you have, let's say, already a proven model of how art, digital art, using immersive tech can have a true impact on, tourism and on attracting new visitors. So I think that could also be like a good way to explore the art creation.
If you don't mind, I have also something to share. First of all, hello everybody. My English is not so perfect, so I will do my best for you, right? So why I'm here? First, to discover this new world for me. I do like the platform of Engage and all the possibilities that there are, but I'm still discovering my idea and why I'm here. It's because I want to develop the education in Africa. Meaning, there is some people really far from big cities, in small village, so there is no infrastructure, etc. And I do think those people has a lot of problem in their country. Okay, the Europe send food, but it's not that point that we need to fix. We need to fix education in order to have people with a good mindset to build things like a wash machine, like, I don't know, there's many things that we can do. So the idea is first to give a good education, because they don't have a good education in mathematics, in science, etc. And second point, the second step, to have a fabrication lab with, for instance, some 3D printer, laser cutter, etc. And thanks to the VR, we can discuss with those people and help their art. You know, the thing is, they want all to come in Europe because they see that on television, it seems to be beautiful for them, etc. And they forget to develop their own country. And they come here for, okay, I'm in Belgium right now. They come also for study, for university, etc. They have not good infrastructure in their country. And the thing is, in that way, all the brain are going out their country. So how come you can develop your own country? You see? So the problem is, is going on and on since long time right now. So I do think that's my best idea. Okay, if I need to invest for people over there, I have to think also, okay, maybe our Oculus Quest will be too expensive. I need to build something really less expensive in order to give to let's say 1,000 young people VR headsets and to get access to good courses.
It's interesting because in the report that we're discussing, they talk about brain drain also, but then mostly the brain drain going from Europe to both America and Asian countries where there's a stronger industry on XR. But it's interesting how you actually sort of recontextualize the whole problem, saying, well, there's also brain drain going from other countries to Europe, while Europe is in no way giving any policy directions in saying we should strengthen those countries as well in building up an ecology, because in the end we want to work together, right? We don't want to end up in these fortresses pretending that we're not we're alone in the world. So thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I think I was recently doing indeed a keynote at the VR Days or the Immersive Tech Week. And one of the things about education was also cost. So like average like primary schools don't have money to buy like 30 Quest 2 headsets, right? And it made me think of actually Google Cardboard. That was an original initiative to say, okay, so what is the tech that is available? Well, a lot of people have smartphones at least. So why don't we make some sort of do-it-yourself kind of, and of course it didn't have head tracking, it was wonky and whatever, but at least develop platforms for people to enable them to do it themselves. And I think that we're sort of losing that that approach a little bit. I think we're so like, what's the next headset? Oh, well, okay, it's another few €100 more expensive, but it can now also do eye tracking and see-through and whatever. But we're not sort of rethinking the fact that maybe it's much better to make the ecology bigger, to also have like these do-it-yourself kits. And I like this, for example, with tracking, that the 5 tracking system became this low-cost motion capture, which, for example, in our school is great. We don't have to buy these full OptiTrack systems, which is do some 5 trackers, and we can do already a lot of very advanced things. So it would be great to sort of think about doing some research on like low-cost solutions, and partly, and this is where the open standard, open source kicks in again, of course, think about what could be platforms like Mozilla Hubs on a phone with Google Cardboard can already be quite an interesting platform to design your own trainings, right? And it's very low cost, and you just need an internet connection and a smartphone that a lot of people have.
I think
that's it. That's the point.
In pushing, and telcos are interested in pushing that forward. So yeah, it would be interesting also to try and engage with them, especially, well, here in Europe, you already see them like trying to push the 5G envelope. And I do believe that they are going to be the ones that are going to massify VR headsets in a given point in time, the same way that they like put something that we still do not understand what it is, called the set-top box in each of our homes without, us noticing, because it was well included in the subscription.
You know, just one thing to follow up, Joris, on what you were describing there. Like the report does, I think it is, now that Nabil, you expanded the discussion a little bit in terms of what is Europe's contribution to the world through XR. It is that's lacking. Is what is Europe to the world? And what does it mean to be European XR? What is it that we associate with it? Not from an internal how we think we are. What is that offering to the world? They kind of hint at it, but it certainly doesn't. That would be a strategy, right?
That's a very
in 5
important
years,
point.
Yeah, in 5 or 10 years, this is what Europe will do for the world through these mediums, and the impact, and what will be recognized, and what we aspire for. That would be the strategy. That would be a strategy that would be great to have seen in it.
Yeah, and also, Nabil, I think, of course, I live in the Netherlands, for example. We're stupendously rich. However, also in my country, there's like schools with no money whatsoever, and there's really like this difference or this gap, this knowledge gap between low income families and high income families, and of course I don't want to compare necessarily with certain areas in Africa where there's really nothing at all, but I think it's a problem that is not only for like third world, context, but it's actually where in my country I can also already see there's a necessity for cheap do-it-yourself XR kind of environments and hardware and software for people to really become inventive in local communities and make stuff that matters to them.
Okay, you know what? Before to have the idea for Africa, it was first for my kids. So I live in Brussels. Really, I live in Brussels. So I'm separate with the mother right now, and my kids live in West Vlaanderen. So a little bit far from me. It's about 150 kilometers from me. So if I don't have a car, if I need to go there, it's 2 hours to go, 2 hours back, you see. And they need me also for some question when they have homework, etc. So I have tried to do my best. They have good results. thanks to God, they have good results. They work hard. They work well. But sometimes when there is something that they do not understand, well, I was trying with my, let's say my WhatsApp, my phone, and I need to scribe like this and to show, okay, there is geometry and blah, blah, blah. And so it's really complicated, difficult. Here, I feel great. I can grab this one. I cannot grab it, but okay. Well,
here, down here, the little circle here. Engage's UI is a bit.
Voilà. So it's really wonderful, and in 3D and etc. For me, it's really wonderful. So it's for my kids first. But if I can do that for my kids, then why not for other kids?
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, and Joris talking about this do-it-yourself, initiatives, right? If that's this contribution, like Europe will be leading accessibility and education for the world, then they perhaps should be. And we have Andre here who's working with like Startup Wise Guys, for example. Then Europe should be giving these incentives to private sector investment to say what we want to see at this high level. We want to see startups and initiatives supported, funded. We can't, that's not our job. We can't go find them and manage them and assess them, but you can, because that's your job. And we're going to incentivize you through, whatever financial mechanisms they have to offer for you to promote these coming from Europe. You can do your regular jobs, but we really want to see you guys investing and fostering companies that are going to make VR accessible to the world much more than it is today.
Expertise. But I still think there are business models whereby you say, in a way, the platform is open, people can make their own content, but for very applied, business-to-business applications, we have a team to design like the best experience, because businesses are not interested in doing it themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's still feasible to say the business model is to earn on making specific content and seamless experiences for business-to-business applications, but the platforms can be provided in a more like open and also do-it-yourself kind of manner. And I think European country can, in fact, in a way, turn that into policies, right?
It's interesting that you say that in Engage, because in a nutshell, that is kind of what separates it a little bit from many of the other platforms. But it also reflects some of the limitations of that if it's purely self-sustaining itself in that manner, because they don't make very much for the public or consumers, because that's not who's paying. They do make the platform available. It is free if you want to jump into something, but it's just there's a really quite a major limit if every innovation in the platform, every new feature or enhancement for the common user is reliant on a company having paid for something, because the companies are not paying for those types of features, I think, and that's the bottom short of it. So Engage is a great example of there is that potential. There's kind of that realization, but it's held back because that model probably doesn't fully satisfy that. It goes a long way, a little bit more if they were getting a grant to make this more creative for non B2B users, right, and consumers. Half of it's already been built by industry, by clients, but there's a little bit more that needs to come, I think, and I think Engage is an example.
It's nice. I think then it would be maybe for another time a nice discussion to really sort of become very specific on where Engage managed to work it out and places where things either don't work or they need to work in a different way. I think it's very interesting. Hey, I need to go
guys,
as well.
On that note, I'm conscious of time. Yeah.
Hey, Nabil, really nice meeting you. And
really, really nice to meet you.
Gwendolyn, if you're still there also.
Yeah, I'm still there. Thank you. Really nice to hear. Really nice. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Joris, very much. And obviously Nabil and Gwendolyn as well, and the guys before. We have another one. I'm organizing another one next Tuesday, which is on a different topic. It's on ethics, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, very
So,
interesting. So I'll try to do my best to be part of that as well. So great initiative.
Well, I hope to see you both as well if you have the same time around
We'll try.
next Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a great
Michael.
rest of your day.
Thanks.
Okay, thank
Bye.
you. Good day.